Hello, and thank you for joining me and checking out my video. My name is Allie with A. Marie Speaks, and as titled, this video is all about what the shadow is. What we're talking about with the shadow, as well as what is happening truly with shadowing, and how we can use the mechanisms and the explanations from the scientific world to draw parallels and create deeper understandings on this concept of shadow work and what we're here to do as energetic alchemy beings, right? So thank you again for tuning in, and I'm going to try my hardest not to get wrapped up in the processes of shadow work, why shadow work is important, or any of that. I have so many videos on that if you are interested. I have an entire playlist already going, 5 or 7, maybe 10 videos, I forget how many I've done, targeting those types of things about shadow work practices and why it's important to us and its benefits and all that kind of stuff. So if that's what you're looking for, I'll leave a link in the description to my playlist so you can check out those videos in your own time. Because this video here, what I really want to do is keep it short and sweet and just talk quickly about how the shadow works, and how not only are we talking metaphorically about shadows, but we're also really talking about physical shadowing. We're also talking about real, describable, witnessable, observable processes that are valid and real and have great worth in this material physical world. It's my hopes that by kind of offering this sort of little breakdown for what the shadow is and what shadow is, that more people will open up their eyes to the commonalities here and to see that although the academia world might have their blinders on and they might be coagulating information and studies and setting parameters in a certain angle to prove things they want to prove from their perspective, that shouldn't stop us or deter us from looking at their evidence and seeing it from a bigger view, from a wider lens, taking away the cattle corral around the studies and information and allowing incorporation of that those processes into more deeper metaphysical kind of workings. So that's my intention, that's my hope. I almost created a Comprehending Consciousness series episode on and just called it The Shadow and was going to bring it there on that series, except that I felt uncomfortable doing that because my intention with Comprehending Consciousness is geared towards people who are newly waking up in the 3D realm and who might be triggered or confused or curious even about these kind of terms and phrases that are being trickling down from the conscious communities, from 5D, New Age, whatever you want to see that kind of counterculture as. They're trickling into mainstream, getting hijacked, and being like promoted kind of falsely on the surface level in mainstream media to people who are asleep, to those who are parroting agendas. And so I've created Comprehending Consciousness to kind of break away those preconceptions and talk about the reality behind the words and what the 5D or the conscious community is really getting at when we talk about these certain words or these certain representations of ideas. Bridging the gap, so to speak, between 3D and 5D. However, this concept of the shadow and talking about this, I feel, isn't really a beginner's kind of level thing. it's more of something that needs to be introduced to people who are really awake and who have already been doing some seeking, some assessment of truth, who have like a sovereign lens to view the world across and through. Because it's just a little bit deeper, I think, a working. So with that kind of precautionary little note here, you're welcome to listen if you are newly waking up, if you happen to just come across my channel now, you know, but try to listen with open ears, open heart, open mind. Open soul, you know, not just listening with this logical, frenetic brain and allowing the critic and the parrots in there to just kind of cause so much noise that you can't even listen to what I'm talking about, right? So the shadow in itself, a lot of times when we talk about the shadow, most of us will see or understand that we are talking metaphorically about our dark side, our evil twin, or our evil side, or the things that are bad about us, that quote unquote are negative, things that we don't like about ourselves even. We could see them as shadow aspects of ourselves. Sometimes this can get confused and tangled and mashed up with things like the ego or the inner child, these kind of other ideas that, especially in the psychological world, kind of get a negative connotation put on them and sort of get to be the representation of all the uncomfortable things that we don't like about ourselves, or all the things that, you know, we feel needed to be excused or explained. We kind of just, oh, that's my ego. Oh, that was my inner child. Oh, that's my shadow. And yes, that's a valid understanding, and it is part of the pie. But let's talk about the other sides as well, right? So we have the larger aspect of the shadow, which is the collective shadow, which sometimes can get marked off as like quote unquote evil, general evil out there, darkness. It can be demons, the devil, Satan. It can be any of these kind of big, really standalone entities that we see as bad and negative, and then we can call them the shadow, or a shadow aspect of whatever. Finally, the last aspect of the shadow that I'd like to tie in here and talk about is physical shadowing, and the actual, the actual representation of distortion of light. And a lot of times, you know, I have seen these as three totally separate things, and they really are, and they have infinite workings in between all three sections. And even if you could see them as layers, you know what I mean? You don't have to look at them as sections, or linear, or 2D, even flat, like a pie graph. You know what I mean? We can look at it multidimensional and understand that each one of these slices of the pie, you know, has a thickness, it has a length, it has a width, it also has, you know, different dimensionalities to it. And so what I'm hoping here with this video is to kind of create more full-bodied understanding and concept of shadow, so that we can see these threads that are underlying and interlinking all of them together, right? And then when we work at them all together instead of separately, we can make great momentum in our lives, and really shift understandings and perceptions, and get into a more free and open understanding and belief and embodiment of energy, right? And of course, like I always say, we do the internal work, right? We fix our internal world. That reflects into our direct world, starts to make and incorporate and bring in great changes in our direct world that we feel, and that confirm to us that this fluid newness is good, and that free service and free flowing information is good. And then once that hits, that reverberates out into the collective and into the conscious collective, and start signaling that and allowing more potentials and possibilities of that great positivity and free-flowing service to permeate out into the collective. And eventually, the collective will reflect back to us that, if enough of us do that, right? If we can get to a greater majority of people who are shining their light in that way. So, quickly, it's the reason I really want to make this video, and the reason that I really wanted to kind of bring forth this information, is because, especially in our more evolved kind of 5D conscious community out here, I have been seeing so many people in groups and communities, you know, talking and sharing and expressing great understanding and great examples of shadow and light and shadow working on an individual level and in a community level, on an emotional or energetic level, and that is wonderful. It really is. My hope is that we could incorporate this other slice of the pie into the energetic spiritual working and get the physical working, to really frame it out and to provide steady railings, guardrails, bumpers, whatever you want to kind of see that as, to help people, to guide them, and to integrate truer working, truer seeking, because when we start to do shadow work, it's so easy to get off alignment and to become misguided, and to allow your shadow to signal the way, kind of subconsciously, without even realizing that it's negative. A lot of people call this spiritual bypassing. That's kind of a trigger word out there these days, and that's what it is. You know, that's what I'm talking about and pinpointing here. And it's my understanding and hope that if we bring in these more detailed instructions on the workings, and we allow them to sort of be the underlayer that we put spirituality and energetic working over, and then view it all together, less and less of us will get caught in these liar loops of spiritual bypassing. Less and less of us will get lost in the ego-centered seeking. You know, we'll be able to catch ourselves when we're in that. We'll be able to identify that negative seeking and curb it, you know, understand why it is that we're doing that kind of seeking in a negative way, and then to refocus and realign and do seeking in a more positive way, if we choose, right? Because it is a free will universe, and we do have this choice point is what we're here to be balancing between and understanding. So, you know, just as words of support and as a wonderful friend, don't get down on yourself. Don't ever try to put yourself on a scale and see if you're negative or positive by listing off qualities or pros and cons. Like, it's not 2D like that. You can't write it down. It's not flat, you know. There's only so much that you can incorporate and see when you try to draw a circle or a sphere on a flat piece of paper, right? And just like that, we are, you know, we are physical, three-dimensional beings, and when we try to put ourselves on a 2D piece of paper and list ourselves out and make comparisons and expect that to fully embody our three-dimensionality, you know, take us somewhere. It's just, it's it shouldn't be seen as an end-all be-all. It should not be seen as like a stamp of approval, the last step. You know, that's like first step, first rough draft kind of things that, okay, use them as little guide stones, you know, but don't think that, you know, you're placing them in the ground and that they're going to stay there, you know. So many of us do, and to me, that's a huge place of how we get caught in negative seeking, negative systems, and how we trick ourselves in these liar loops, and we stay there, and then we convince ourselves that like we're not doing that, and then we just try to keep going without ever actually like assessing the thing that we blinded ourselves to. When we pull out and use a more scientific method, I guess, when we look at shadow work and ourselves and our shadow and our light, it really helps bring it off that 2D piece of paper and pop it into life and allow free flowingness to happen and allow, you know, integration and change, alterations. That's what we are here to do as creator beings, right? We take templates and we alter them and we create newness out of them. And share it, and so that in itself is what we should try to be doing with ourselves at all times, right? And with our shadow and our light. And so I believe that we can learn a lot if we use some of this statistics and studies and parameters and all that kind of white coat kind of talk. If we can use some of their resources and we can use some of their things in guidance on this great spiritual energetic work, I just think that it will really up-level all of us, up-level our work. And so what do I mean by that really, and how do we do that, right? So all of us in the conscious community and those of us who've been awake for a while, you know, we could already be well versed in understanding the shadow. We could already, like myself, you know, you could be very familiar with like Steiner, Carl Jung, a lot of those kind of people who have talked a lot about the shadow. And so I don't want to, you know, beat a dead horse here, but I also want to, you know, be able to draw parallels between what I'm talking about. So if we see our shadow and light as shadow and light in the universe, then we can understand that, of course, it cannot be about one or the other overpowering and winning and taking over all and forcing everything to be darkness or forcing everything to be total light. Because if you question yourself and you think about that to yourself and you actually spend some time reflecting, you'll find uncomfortability with that. You know, you'll find out, well, that doesn't really heal me, my shadow, my wounds, my traumas. You know, those parts of myself that I see and I feel uncomfortable about are there for a reason. And it's not to mask it, cover it up, and check it out. It's to look at it, to open it up, to allow it to react and respond the way it is, and then to offer assistance and healing, offer solutions that work for it, for all of us, in order to get it to a more comfortable place, and to be able to integrate and accept it into yourself. So it's, to me, a lot of times, and especially get back to the spiritual bypassing kind of like falsity that we put on this, the distortions that light workers are full of light and have no badness, or that the evil and shadows and demons and darkness are something separate and different than light, and they need to be cast out and destroyed. And that's the only way good wins, or light wins, or whatever. And to me, that seems a little naive. That seems a little bit, a little too focused in directly, and then missing and disregarding the bigger picture. Because, I mean, the biggest picture of all is that this is a duality octave. This set of lessons and learning that we cycle through here in the densities is ruled by duality. It has functions and purpose here, and has been placed on top of this sacred boundary of whatever kind of world plane that we're embodying, you know. There's no two ways to get around it. There's only one way, and that's to see contrasts, that's to compare, that's to put things on a spectrum. And it's a great gift. It really is. And so let's not waste it, and let's not just think that it's, let's not just take it for surface level. Let's actually dive in and understand that because we are presented with organic cycles of up and down, yes and no, light and dark, in and out, cold and hot, that clearly, that's a clue. Clearly, it's an undeniable truth. It operates without human influence. It operates of free service. It's organically flowing. And therefore, we should be observing it and taking note of it, observing it for what it is. And as we're witnessing the functionality of it, we should be doing that with as little bias as possible, However, I think a lot of us, we pick and choose and we cherry pick, and then we create statistics and parameters that will showcase conclusion that we feel comfortable with. And that's a great metaphor for life, and it's a great metaphor for how everything's happening in the world today. And it's a great metaphor for free market and business as well, right? Negative systems function in that way. Restriction, confinement, distortion, to be perceived from a certain way, and to control the perception of others, to ensure that that is seen in the same way, right? That is negative harnessing of energy and intention. And I will say, this is why I'm leading out with this example here, to understand the conceptuality of how we create these distortions and lies around truth. That working is the same structure and function that happens when light, physical light, is distorted. When something casts itself against the light, it creates shadow. And deeper than that, that great gnosis is that actually it's light in itself bending on itself and creating shadow, creating distortion in itself, making that choice. Because it is a free will universe, we have that choice, right? And you and I, we might have a deeper understanding of light and how information travels on light, and maybe that's a new concept to you. I've done a whole episodes and talked really about more down-to-earth, grounded understanding of love and light, and what light really is, what information and wisdom really are. So I'll link that below too if you're interested in listening to me talk about that a little bit more. But the functionality of that light trying to be seen in a certain way, it creates shadowed areas, it creates a darkness, it creates a tint, a literal physical shadow, right? Like behind me now. And that in itself is the same thing, just in a different level and different layering and different densities than and dimensions that we are doing with our energetic body, with our own internal light, as we're creating lies and distortion. Whether it's internal lies we tell ourselves, or we're trying to create lies for others to actually be a part of, to be disillusioned by, it's the same function of bending light, of a distortion of the casting of truth. And also, I will say, you know, there's huge bodies of knowledge about light and scientific studies about how light works and moves and within the ether and all of that. You know, it has a lot to do with what we are calling and examining as magnetism, right? And about how opposite charges work and seek, and points of neutrality that are actually created when we have opposites, right? That great motion. You know, it's everything is, all the words are so interchangeable, and all the words have so many meanings, and it's really fun and quirky to me as the depth of knowledge becomes greater, to see all the plays on words, all the puns, all the magic that is contained within words, and how you start to see the deeper truths, and it pulls in confirmation for you. And I'll give an example of this, and I kind of touched on it just now, but it's that concept, or that old phrase about bending the truth. You know, people will be like, oh, he's bending the truth, you know. The truth is light. Our light is our truth. And it's our information. It's our knowledge and wisdom. And when we bend it, we're creating a lie. We're creating a distortion in the directionality of it, right? And what happens when you bend a light beam? You create a shadowed area, right? And what happens when you bend your truth? You create a lie. And that creates shadow within you. That's your shadow. That's how it happens. And so if you are continuously conscious about how and where your light is angled at, where your truth is focused, and how it's flowing, and you try to be transparent and honest about that all the time, and feel it and allow it to flow out, instead of bending and distorting it, telling it has to go a certain way, or allowing inconsistencies from other people to kind of turn your seeking into a way that seems externally okay, based on other people's perceptions or something. All these little divots, all these little turns and stuff are creating all these little tiny shadows in you everywhere, because you're distorting your light. You're distorting your truth. And that in itself, it was created a great understanding and working for me to really get the momentum going on how to integrate shadow and light. And finally here, I'll say in closing, because I have to wrap it up and I want to keep this video kind of quick. The shadow, our shadow, the collective shadow, and actual darkness are, and by darkness, excuse me, let me just, I'm hearing myself and noticing the double play on words. I don't mean nighttime. I don't mean a shading of less light. as in the color black or getting visually dark. I'm talking about darkness as in negative emotions, or evil or whatever, that kind of segment of darkness. So our shadow, the collective shadow, and darkness, the archons, negative agendas, negative systems, and seeking, all play the same game. They all are on the same rules. They all are on the same table. They skate on the same thread of ice here. And if we as the conscious community could really hold that as truth and take ownership to that and have some sovereign responsibility for our shadow and the impacts that it does have on the rest of others and on our universe and on our world and our planet and even outside of that, right? If we could hold some responsibility for that and act in accordance to that, I really think that that's going to speed up the clearing that needs to take place here, because shadow has really taken over. It's really displaying itself to its full capabilities right now, because it's my opinion that because of the ignorance and the understanding of the fact that we are spiritual alchemic beings, energy alchemists here, learning these skills. That's what we're here to do. But since we don't really understand that and aren't grasping that concept, it's been made into this superficial seeking and a life of materialism. And that in itself is kind of confirmation and kind of food or fuel for negative systems in the shadow. And it can't crumble, it can't break apart until more and more of us start to take ownership of our part of that great shadow, and then brighten our light and work on our own to clear it out, and to then pull our light out of the matrix overlay and to create great positive light systems outside of it, and draw everybody over there with our light, right? But until we understand, the depth of the shadow, and until we understand the depth of the working that's needed to happen, it's going to continue to grow, unfortunately. And finally here, I guess, just let me wrap up and say that yes, we put things on this spectrum. We put dark over here, we put light over here, we put shadow over here, and we put, our goodness on this side maybe. And it's helpful and also a little, what's the word? Sort of like a crutch. It's sort of like an enabling, stagnant setup to work with, because it's too linear, it's too flat. It's the same thing as I talked about before, trying to put your pros and cons of all of your shadow and light on a piece of paper. It can't fully embody and represent 3D. And when we look at light and dark on a spectrum like that, a lot of times what we forget is that actually it's part of a whole, right? Light and dark are sides of a coin, and we're forgetting about the whole coin. And that in itself is a great trick of the shadow, a great trick of the negative agenda, and those that are really pulling the strings of the collective shadow. And our best means of defense and offense against that is to do the inner work, to recognize that we are both, that we are here to embody both, that it's not a casting out of one and an overpowering of another. It's about harmonious integration, and allowance of cycling, and the lessons and the work and the strength that comes through doing those exercises. That's what we're here for. We're not here to stop the duality spectrum from happening and to make things all light and good. Earth's ascension, the universe's ascension, the octaves of different ascensions are created for different reasons, and we pass through them for set reasons. We don't go through them to fix the reasons they are created for, their great purpose. We have nothing to do with that logos. We're not at that level. You know, we're down, and tinier into individual level. Our work is to flush out and free up our being within the great scope of the parameters that are provided to us in this reality, which happens to be duality here. And the more we get caught up focusing on shadow, calling it evil, saying we have to break it up, saying we have to cast it out, seeing it as darkness and black and bad, and thinking that we have to force that darkness to be light in order to win. That's kind of just keeping us in the same liar's loop, the spiritual bypassing that I was talking about at the beginning, I think. Unless this is the clipped video, because I did start a video and stop, so forgive me if I didn't go over that concept in this video. Recording issues this morning. But with that said, you know, it's about working the integration of both and becoming stronger because of that great working that's placed upon us here at this time in this space within this world. So the less we could get away from, you know, trying to demonize and fight against the darkness and cast out the shadows, and instead we could see that those shadows are made of light. They're made of distorted, bent up, you know, brambles of light that have been like in this rat's nest kind of bent and stuck in. And if we could, instead of, you know, trying to put that in the trash and throw it away, if instead we could get in there and start to slowly pull out those pieces and the thorns and allow those brambles and set the branches out in a line, you know, and ask them what they need, or just allow them to be free and feel open once they're all not bent and distorted. We'd realize they're all a part of us, right? It's our own light that we have chosen to bend and to disfigure and to contort and constrain into certain ways. Then we'd have full respect of ourselves, full respect of the journey here, full respect of the spectrum, and you know, we can work more fluidly and more honestly. And that really is, I feel, the calling here, the purpose here for all of us. Honest and transparent, free-flowing energy. So I guess what I will close with is my hopes that I have sort of brought in a little bit more of how science can actually back up our metaphysical idea of spiritual work and of shadow work. And if we could use them as guidelines or railings, you know, not set in stone, but something that can be there to remind us of our great purpose, our individual purpose, and our purpose as a collective. I think it could be really helpful at this time for a lot of people. So, with that said, I guess I'll leave it there for now. I hope you have found this enlightening, and I hope that you will take your shadow out of those boxes, out of that sort of jammed up closet perhaps that you kind of try to put it away in, and really allow it to be there and allow conversation to happen between it with your light and your shadow, because that will not only empower your light and remind you that you are strong enough, you are purposeful, you are just enough as you are, the good and the bad. You'll strengthen your light by doing that work of acceptance, and you'll also ease those really hard spots, those really rough pieces of the shadow, so that they loosen up a little bit and you can work on them more. You can work to integrate them and find out, you know, why they are so heavy, why they seem so dark, why it is you chose to take the truth of whatever happened and bend it and wrap it and create dark spaces in there to hide inside and deter away from and stagnate and slow down, close out, separate yourself from. Because at the end of the day, if you can just tune back into the one truth, that we are all one, that we were created for a purpose, that there is a great before and a great after, that we are all in this together and returning to at some point, right? That one truth alone, just go and whisper that to your shadow and remind it of that. And you'll be surprised at the replies and the responses and the calls for help that you receive when you look at it that way. And then, like I said before, you get to do some inner work. You get the training wheels on, doing that practice with your own shadow, calming it, working with it, offering it great service of unconditional love and understanding to find harmonious solutions. And then you'll notice you can do it with others. Then you'll notice in your direct world, those people who pop up who are shadows to you, who are reflections of negativity, who are triggered by you or you are triggered by them, that they are representations of an external shadow of yours of some kind, you'll be able to incorporate and approach them and work through those problems easier, those catalysts, You'll be reminded of your great strength and you will know, well, I'm presented with this because I'm strong enough for this obstacle. It matches my calling. It matches the level of energy and frequency that I'm embodying right now, and I have called it forth. That means I'm strong enough to meet it, and I must meet it, because if we don't, you're attempting to shine your light out straight as truth, to use it to witness and to assess things honestly, for positive outcomes and for goodness, right? If you're presented with something that is negative against your light and it's creating and appearing dark and shadowed, it's of your utmost importance to respond maturely and ready for that. If you don't, and you allow that shadow to step into your light and to bend it, and then you contort yourself, you're agreeing with that shadow. You're empowering that external shadow, and you're empowering your internal shadow by agreeing with that. And you're bending your light even more, and you're distorting and dimming your light even more. Because you're not assessing, you're not confronting, you're not saying, I see you exactly as you are within my light. I see you stepped in front of my light. What do you need? Instead, you're saying, oh, I'm nervous. Oh, I'm scared. Oh, this thing made me feel like my light's not that good enough. Oh, no. It must be not good enough. I must not be good enough. And then you're bending your light even more, and you're dimming it. And you're giving into your shadow. And you're, like I said, you're empowering that external shadow. And like I said at the very start of this video, right? These three sections of perceived shadow are all actually the same workings, and they're all part of that great spectrum of duality that we're all placed against and we all reside within. And so the more honest work that we do and the more honest assessment that we do, the greater that the light can become, the greater that the transparency can become. And the more that we bow down and bend ourselves in and dim our lights and allow distortions and disruptions of our light to reflect back into us instead of as input information that we can then respond against and not agree with, if we allow it to come into us and become part of us and to confirm that to us and to be a truth, well, then you're feeding your shadow, and you're feeding that shadow as well, and you're feeding the entire dark side of the spectrum and ensuring that darkness and manipulation will continue on. So every little moment counts, every little confrontation counts, every moment, every little input value that comes through your reality space really matters. And when you take a sovereign responsibility for your life and your experience here, you realize it does matter, and you start to respond accordingly to that. And you start to ask yourself, well, how would I like to be seen as responding like this? How is my true light really going to respond to this? And then we see easier solutions. You know, people love us. People come to us because we always have the answers, or they feel seen with us, or they feel heard and accepted. They're comfortable with us. You know, they think we have the best solutions, or they think we're problem solvers, and that kind of thing. When you do the work on your own, and when you actually confront shadow for what it is when it's put in front of you. And finally, I will close with this, because a lot of people, there can be a fear, there can be a courage versus fear kind of struggle when we're confronted with a shadow, with evil, with darkness or badness. When something steps into our light beam, so to speak, right? If you allow that disruption, that darkness, that evil to have power over you, then it does. If you choose not to, it cannot. It's all intention. It's heart-based. It's that language that flows out through the ether that is frequency-based, and it says, I do not consent. I am what I am, and I will not bend my light for you. When a shadow comes into our light, when evil steps into you, when anything is called forth to you from the darkness, when anything reaches its hand up and casts a shadow against your light and you see it, the only reason that negative entity has done that and is capable of doing that is because it is weaker than you. No darkness can ever approach something stronger than it. No negatively oriented system will ever approach something that seems stronger than it. It has self-preservation and survival at its truth, and it will never risk that because it thinks it has only one life. It thinks, it lives in separation. It lives in the original lie that it is not part of all of one. It is not part of the great before or after. That whatever it's believing right now is all it is, and when it's gone, it's gone. And that can be a really scary place to be at. And no entity and no being or no system that follows that rule of thumb and law is going to step into something where it thinks that it's definitely going to die. It's definitely going to be cast out. It's definitely going to be seen and called out for what it is. It's not going to call attention to it. That's why they stay in the dark and in the shadows. So just know that if you are brought forth, something is in your light, something is wrong, something feels off, questionable, it feels funky, funny money, and you notice it, you had better call it out for what it is, and do it with courageous strength, because know that it's weaker than you. Don't do it as a tyrant. Don't do it as a point of having power over that shadow, because you know you're stronger than it and it's weak. That now comes from a negative place, and you're just empowering your shadow moreover. Instead, come at it with compassion and empathy, like if a child was asking you for something that they need, they're not strong enough to pick up this big boulder that's, like tied to their leg or whatever. They're like dragging a boulder, and the child's like, can you help me carry this for a little while? I can't go on anymore. And that's the shadow that is able to get into your light, right? When it's seeking assistance like that. If you're like, oh, you're so stupid, go do some push-ups and then pick up your own ball and get out of here. That's not helpful, right? But if you see that and say, oh, of course I'll help you, and you pick it up because it's easy for you, and you carry it for them because you know they're exhausted and they need help, and you do it from a place of unconditional love and service to them, right? This is the different intention of approach. And this is the end-all be-all. This is the cut and dry of it. It's the intention that you approach things with that stamps the deal, that makes the exchange, that gathers your polarity in your energetic charge. So when the shadow comes up and you know it, instead of being fearful of it or instead of being overpowering over it, approach it with a place of sovereign equality. Approach it with unconditional love and ask it what it needs, and offer that service to assist it. And you'll be surprised the reactions that you get from it and how it actually responds to that great truth reverberating through the ether and through your communication with it, it will respond in a loving, unconditional way, because it is seeking its own light. You know, it is tired of being bent up, but it doesn't know how to do any other way, right? So never be afraid if bad things are happening to you, or uncomfortable things are popping up, or you feel like you're being presented with a great entity of darkness or whatever. Stand in your light and know that your light is strong enough to lead that shadow back to its own truth and light, because otherwise it would have never been called to you. Otherwise it would have never taken the effort to present itself in front of your light. Yeah, I guess that's where I'll end it for, before I get a little too wrapped up, because I can feel myself wanting to go into the need of balancing and how we can empower our light and all of that jazz. But if you are interested in more, you can definitely find more me talking about this in depth in a bunch of other shadow work videos. But for now, I guess I'll leave it there. I hope this has been enlightening. I hope it has really helped to tie in some of the more scientific understandings of the actual light and shadow that's happening here, and that is at great work on so many different levels of life and of experience. Yeah, so if you have any replies or responses, I'd love to hear them. Leave them in the comments. Send me an email. My email's always in the descriptions in case you're interested. In the meantime, find me on Telegram, BitChute, YouTube, Spotify. I have a podcast as well with different content over there. All of it I'm under A. Marie Speaks. You can check out amariespeaks.com as well, which has not only my own personal information about like readings that I do, books that I've written, and things like that, but also it has a plethora of categories, tips, and tools across all things introspection, spirituality, and happiness. Free resources on all types of stuff I love that I have enjoyed reading about, over all types of different things. So you can check that out as well. And I will see you next time.